Hello, everyone joining ATM Virtual 2021. Welcome to Booking.com session, where we'll be looking at some key travel market insights and more specifically consumer travel trends related to behavior and sentiment in the travel industry. I'm Carolina Tutay and I head up the market research and insights team in the marketing department. At Booking.com, we care about understanding what's going on in the mind of the travelers, what moves them, what impact the world has on their behavior and their needs when it comes to travel. Every year we run a bunch of global research studies to unravel what makes travelers tick. And of course, we've had just quite a unique year, 2020, with COVID-19 affecting all of us in many different ways. So obviously we'll dive into that topic as well. And today I have with me two experts from my team joining. Veronica Ravaglia, who's a seasoned researcher and currently much involved in research for the partner marketing team, but also dedicated to sustainable travel. And that's also a topic that Elina Metze, who's also research on my team, she works on and really dedicates a lot of her time to tracking our consumer brands and unraveling travel trends worldwide. So Veronica and Elina will share some of their most interesting findings from some of the recent consumer research they have conducted themselves, ranging from survey data to some online discussions we've had with travelers, pulling data from external industry reports as well. So without further ado, let's get started. So when we're looking at the world of travel, Veronica, would you mind describing, what is the current landscape and what do we expect for the coming years?
Thanks for your question, Carolina. I'd like to start bringing up an example, a positive one, which is China. So between January and February of the previous year, the past year, China's air travel and hotel bookings fell by more than 80% compared to 2019. However, the spring after, China's domestic air travel has rebounded almost completely. And right now we know that in Stania, which is China's Florida, the market is already stronger than it was before COVID-19. However, we should expect each country taking a different path. What worked well for China were few things. For instance, the previous investments that they did in infrastructures, but also the capability of industry players to adapt very quickly to new needs and behaviors. For instance, we saw some airlines companies start offering limitless tickets, meaning that people could buy as many flights as they want for a fixed period of time, for a fixed price. Another example that we saw working pretty well was airline companies start offering digital health passes. Despite the best or worst country practices, there are indeed different possible scenarios that we could see happening in the close future. McKinsey did a quite extensive work about it and theorized few possible different models. Accordingly to the most optimistic one, we will see recovery to 85% of 2019 volumes this year and a full recovery by 2023. While under a more pessimistic scenario, we should expect volumes this year being as low as 60% of 2019 ones.
And as I think you mentioned, bringing up the example of China, we expect to see domestic travel to recover first. Is there anything else you can tell us about that?
Yeah, indeed. We should expect domestic travel recovering approximately 1 or 2 years earlier than outbound travel. And so driving the industry recovery, at least in the shorter terms. There are a few countries that are better positioned in this sense. For instance, in Asia, we saw a few governments start offering voucher schemes or monetary contribution to citizens for promoting this type of tourism. But also there are countries such as Russia or Germany, which actually have a strong outbound traveler base that they could easily convert into domestic travelers.
Yeah, think that makes a lot of sense. And maybe looking also at the mix of kind of leisure and business travel. I'm curious to hear, what are we expecting any differences between recovery when it comes to leisure travel compared to business?
So the answer is that historically, yes, leisure travel is usually expected to recover 1 or 2 years earlier than business one. And this is because usually companies take a more measured approach. However, during this crisis, we actually saw a different trend, and this is based on our internal data, but not only. The CEO of IHG, Keith Barr, stated that while their total demand dropped quite drastically last year, actually the mix of business and leisure travel stayed pretty much the same. This could be justified probably by a new trend, which is work from everywhere, but obviously this is not probably the only reason. So that's quite interesting, I thought.
Thank you. And I think the trends we've just discussed so far are mostly based on some more factual and larger economic figures. But what are travelers telling us right now? What do they actually think about the idea of going back to travel soon?
So we know from both internal and external data we have collected that actually they intend to travel in the shorter term, and for shorter term I mean under 6 months is actually low. In the US, for instance, we know that only 23% of people actually are planning to travel for leisure in the upcoming 6 months. But in the longer term, we recently noticed that the intention to travel is increasing. And this is probably because people are now postponing their travel plans. In fact, a study conducted by Focusrite actually tells us that about half of travelers express that the fears of getting ill along the journey is impacting the way they're planning their trip. On the more positive side, we know, because we talk with people all along 2020, that actually all of them cannot wait to be back and travel again. I brought here a quote that we have collected through an online community we hosted for quite some time last year. And this US participant was writing, "I can't wait to get back out there to explore all the world has to give us." So indeed, people are quite hopeful and positive about the idea of traveling again.
I think that's really good to hear, that of course the idea of being able to travel again, it does make people happy, and I certainly feel the same. And I do think that probably the rollout of vaccinations worldwide will play an important role in bringing travelers back. So do you have any insights about how this is actually affecting people's intention to travel?
So even before a vaccine was approved, so last summer we have conducted a survey, and actually the majority of people were telling us that they were not feeling comfortable in traveling again until there was a vaccine. And then luckily the vaccine came end of the year, and this indeed boosted the confidence. Another quote I brought here is from a British lady, and she's saying, "I'm more positive since the news of the Pfizer vaccine and hope that travel will be able to resume after immunization has been carried out." Globally, we know that 3/4 of people, according to TripAdvisor, said they will be more likely to travel internationally if they will get a vaccine. And actually, this percentage rises to almost 90% for traveling domestically. We also know from other survey data we have collected that the population aged 55 plus actually expect to coming back to travel sooner than younger generations. And this is because they actually think they will get a vaccine before of the summer. So there is quite a lot of optimism around these vaccine news and programs that are being rolling out currently. But there are indeed a few factors that will impact more concretely on travel intent, such as the vaccine distribution, the willingness that people will have to take the vaccine, measurements that will be in place different destinations, but also the perceived risk of still being able to contract the disease despite being vaccinated.
Yeah, things, it seems as soon things that will get safer, people will hit the road again. And this makes me wonder about, what will these next trips look like? So we're going to turn to Elina. And Elina, do you have any information you can share about, what will people's kind of first trips look like when they go back and the road again?
Yeah, definitely. Well, first of all, we already know that people are very excited to get back out there and travel. Everyone's been tied to their homes, and they've been dreaming about their next vacation as they have been back home so much. And actually, as a result of their dreams and wishes for going back to travel, they now have a pretty good idea of what their first trips are going to look like. So through research, we know that there are definitely some changes with regards to what trips are going to look like in the future, but some things have also remained quite stable, I would say. So we ran two large global researches in the past year that looked into this a little bit more closely. One of them we ran in July in 28 markets, which was mostly about people's expectations for the future of travel. And then another one we ran in November, again in 28 markets, which was a little bit more about sort of the motivations for travel, people's general attitudes towards it, but also things that they'd be looking for when they're booking travel.
Excellent. So let's dive into it. What can you tell us from the research about the future of travel?
Well, in a nutshell, what we can say is that people want to take more shorter breaks than they did in the last years. Also, they're planning to travel more in smaller groups of friends and family, and they plan to travel more sustainably. So first, I want to dive into this whole friends and family travel thing, because that's not necessarily something new. We already know from previous research that travel to or with friends and family has always been one of the most common ways of traveling, and it still is. All we're seeing right now is that it has become even more common and more important. Obviously, the pandemic separated all of us from our loved ones, so the need to reconnect with them is stronger than ever. And travel provides a very unique opportunity to do so, because you can take yourself away from all the stress factors at home. Now, having said that, not everything is going to be completely different about travel when it comes back up again. So we already knew from previous research as well that relaxing trips, beach breaks, and city trips are the most popular types of trips that people always plan to take more of in the upcoming years. And this has remained the same, except what we're seeing now is that relaxing trips and beach breaks have become even more wanted for the next year. And so what this tells us is that there is an even stronger need for relaxation. Obviously, relaxation was already the one key driver for travel, but it has become even more important now, because I don't think I need to tell you, it's been a pretty stressful year for everyone.
Yeah, I think those are really good tips to address. And you were telling a bit more about kind of the changes and some things that stay the same in terms of the needs and wants that people have from travel on the shorter term. But are there any also longer term trends that we can expect based on the research?
Yeah, there definitely are. I think the most important one, I've already briefly mentioned it, is about sustainability. Sustainable travel is definitely something that we've noticed through our own research, but also through external research. That's going to be a pretty hot topic in the coming years. As a result of the pandemic, there's been a lot of news coverage on sort of the positive impact that national lockdowns and travel bans have had on the environment. And then also things like supporting local businesses have become very top of mind for people. So in general, sustainability has been given a little bit more importance in people's lives, and people have been thinking about it a little bit more. And what we found through one of our researches is that actually for 53% of travelers globally, this specifically has caused them to want to travel more sustainably in the future, just knowing that the pandemic has already had a positive impact. And we also know, actually, for more than 2/3 of all travelers, that they are expecting the travel industry to start offering more sustainable options. So there's definitely a very strong need for the travel industry, for every single player within the travel industry, to do their bit and to answer these consumer needs and wishes, and to start actually making sustainable travel more common.
We've been looking at kind of what type of trips people are expecting to take, but we haven't really covered the destination yet, or like where will people be traveling to, and what will they want to get out of that destination?
Yeah, well, as Veronica already mentioned, we're expecting local travel or domestic travel to come back much sooner than international travel. So that's also something that we found through our research. But we did take it just a step further to look into what people are actually looking for when they're traveling locally, and what are the things that they're actually enjoying. And what we found is that the two most important things to people when it comes to local travel is that they can appreciate nature that they would normally have overlooked. And also they can explore new destinations within their own region that they didn't know about before. And all of this kind of adds to this new appreciation for your own country or region, which is something that people are starting to quite enjoy. Just another point that we shouldn't overlook when it comes to local travel is the food scene. Because local travel does tend to save people a little bit of money, as they don't have to pay for expensive flights to get to the other side of the world or anything. And this money that's being saved is being spent mostly on food, great food, local food, just food. And as we know also, this is not just something that people are doing right now just because they have to travel locally. It's actually a lot of people have been quite positively surprised by how much they've enjoyed this local travel, that 85% of travelers actually do feel motivated to keep up this local travel trend, even once things go back to normal. So I do think it's something that we shouldn't be overlooking or just dismissing as something that's a temporary COVID thing, but something that might actually stay with us for a lot longer.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, and it's really interesting to hear about how people are kind of differently looking at sustainable travel and local travel, and and appreciate things maybe a little bit different now these days than we used to. And it does feel like these trends will stretch over a longer period of time. So definitely something we need to keep monitoring. And what about looking kind of at now back at the shorter term and the maybe the next trips that people are going to book for the upcoming months? What is kind of the current mindset, and what are any specific things that travelers are taking into consideration?
Yeah, well, people are a lot more rigorous in their search and booking criteria when it comes to travel right now. I think whereas in the past people might have been very quick to book something without really thinking twice, people do have a few extra concerns now that we need to be answering. So obviously these are still very much related to COVID. With a very strong focus on health and safety regulations, particularly related to hygiene. And although we might think that this is something that will disappear completely as soon as we're sort of out of the woods, I don't think that we can actually expect this to disappear quite that quick, because we have been in this situation for a year, and who knows how much longer it's going to be. It's going to take people quite some time to get out of this mindset as well. So people will still be looking for what are the hygiene standards at this accommodation, or how will they guarantee the safety of guests. So we need to answer this sort of expectation and need from consumers as well. And again, we shouldn't underestimate just quite how long that might take.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And providing this information moving forward, and for at least a considerable amount of time will be important to everyone in the travel industry. So definitely something that will stay with us for a couple of years. So maybe let's turn to Veronica again. And I'm curious, Veronica, are there any other things that you have spotted in terms of how the pandemic has kind of changed the industry for the longer term? Any additional trends that travel players should start thinking about?
Yeah, indeed. There are a few additions I'd like to make, but first, I'd like to bring here a quote from the CFO of Sonder, which is an hospitality startup. And he recently said, "We will look back and say 2020 was horrible, but for our businesses, it actually accelerated behavioral changes by decades." In the most promising scenario, we should expect travel to be back in a pair of years or so. However, the next generation of travelers won't probably look the same as they used to look like before the pandemic. There are indeed a few macro trends, and Elina already mentioned a few of them, that we'll need to observe and be prepared to welcome. So Elina already mentioned about a new focus on regional and domestic travel, increased awareness about the impact that we're having on the planet, and a new desire for nature getaways and adventures. However, there are a pair more that I'd like to mention here. So the first one is about people adopting more and more flexible and conscious work routine. The pandemic most likely will further blur the line between business and leisure travel. Workaway stays are still quite niche. However, we should expect them happening more and more in the upcoming years as soon as measures will be released and companies will adopt more flexible working policies. From our travel trends study, we know what people are looking for while they're searching for a destination to work from. And indeed, they are looking for a close-by beach or nature or national park and a warm climate. That is not surprising, I guess. While in terms of amenities, obviously, they are looking for a Wi-Fi and laptop-friendly space, but also for air conditioning, a nice view from their own room, and hopefully a good restaurant. The second trend we have spotted is about hospitality being redesigned by technology. So the pandemic indeed accelerated the adoption of technology from many perspectives. In the hotel space, probably the contactless offering is the key protagonist. And some examples of these are contactless payments, guest engagement tools, online or kiosk-based self-check-ins, and keyless entry. And we know that people are actually getting more and more ready to adopt these new technologies. For instance, from our Future of Travel study, we know that 60% of people actually consider contactless payment apps an acceptable alternative. Booking.com on its side is also rolling out right now a new prepaid payment method to relieve hoteliers about the worries of contacting and dealing with guests about payment. We should also expect the mobile being more and more present in the travel journey, especially in the planning phase. And we know from the past year that actually people are booking more and more through our own app. And this is because actually booking through the app makes for them easier to book and modify the reservation when needed.
Thank you both, Veronica and Elina, for sharing your observations with us today. And I'd like to recap some of the things that you talked about. So, a few things to really keep in mind when we talk about and think about, the new generation of travel. So, in the upcoming next trips, and hopefully that will be soon this year, people are really looking to reconnect with their friends and family. And they use their next travel to relax or to explore nature. And domestic and local travel will be really key in 2021, but even far beyond, as people are starting to appreciate their closer environment and their closer destinations more than in the past. People have become more conscious about the impact of the planet and society, and there's a growing need to really travel sustainably. So this already starts actually with making small adjustments to our behavior and making these things visible to the customer in your own property will have already a positive impact in itself. Working remotely actually from home, but also from other destinations, location has increased tremendously with more and more people working from other locations. And I think hotels and vacation rental type properties are really best equipped to cater to these needs. So something to really consider in the nearby future. And finally, digital technology, I think, will be more and more at the core of our travel experience, something that people actually feel quite comfortable with, and both in the planning, in the booking phase of travel, but also during the stay, where people appreciate having a contactless check-in experience. So overall, looking at these trends, I think there's a lot of exciting news for us and for our industry. So I'd say let's make it happen all together.